Hello, welcome to all of you to our new edition of Leaders Who Have Something to Say. This is the place to get inspired with the best actionable leadership advice from outstanding leaders. I'm Mariana Ferrari, and our special guest today is Jingjin Liu. She's the CEO of ZaZaZu. Can you believe that name? I just love it. The platform, it is the first platform in Asia that was created to help women navigate microaggressions and sexism at work. Now, we also have Amsai Jackson, our executive producer, Roxana Bisbal, and Fernando, who are here to help us manage all your questions and comments. And today, those are going to be super important. Now, microaggressions in life and work are, in my own opinion, rampant. Now, in life as well, right? It happens everywhere and all the time. In fact, in the US, there's a study which pointed that 64% of women at work are subject to microaggressions. And also, it establishes or pointed that there's a correlation between a microaggression, sexism, and racism. So it is something that it really affects all of us. We are convinced that raising the topic and having real, no ice coating conversations spark change. So we have an expert guest in navigating and managing microaggressions, but we also have you in the chat and in the comments. And I would love to know what your opinions are, and of course, what questions do you have for Jin? So please do be very super active today on the chat. This is an important issue that involves all of us. Jingjin, hello, and it is such a pleasure to have you here today with us, sharing your best advice on navigating and managing microaggressions at work. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much for the warm introduction, Mariana. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening from all across the world. I'm based in Singapore, so it's in the night. And a topic that is really close to my heart that empowered me to start ZaZaZu. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Jingjin. And I love it that you said good morning, good afternoon, good night, and that you're in Singapore and Amsa is in the US, the rest of the team, we're in Spain. And this is the world right now. I mean, we're connected from all over the world, and we're going to touch a little bit of this conversation. We're going to address the internationality that we're all facing and how microaggressions play a role in different cultures. So hang on with me. Let's start, Jingjin, with a very basic question. How and what is considered a microaggression? Help us understand that.
Well, microaggression, as the word is already displayed, is the everyday verbal, behavioral, or environmental slights, snubs, or insults, whether it's intentional or unintentional, that communicate a hostile, negative message to a person that based solely on their group membership. So it could be race, it could be gender, it could be their sexual orientation, and it affirms a certain stereotype. This is microaggression. It's the everyday small water drips.
Okay, so it's anything that it's stereotyping someone and not being very conscious, or maybe yes, of how you're impacting that person with your stereotyping, correct?
Yeah, you basically presume all members in that group are the same. For example, it's like all agents, are mute. All brown people, they are construction workers. They don't work in any intellectual professions. You just minimize or deny biases or discriminate people and to a certain group.
You mentioned Asians, you mentioned brown people. Now, let me ask you, and I always think that we all are biased somehow.
Yeah.
So are we biased towards white people?
As well. We
as well,
are
right? Yeah.
as well, absolutely. We are all in a way racist. I just
Yeah.
have to put it that way. Is that we have our own bias. This is how because the environment we grew up. I grew up in China in the 80s. So when I see at that time when there were very few white people still in China, because China was considered as a third world country at that time. So when we look at the blonde, the people with their white skin, we would like to touch them. And because it's so privileged
I
and
remember,
it's
yeah. I remember
you just
going
see
to
it.
India. Yeah, that happened
Yeah,
to me. Yeah.
and you just feel that it's something better, and that belief also because of colonialism, for example, in Southeast Asia, people still perceive white as a big privilege. So if a white person is going to speak on the conference versus an Asian person is going to speak in the conference, you would naturally think that the white person, male or female, is more competent.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that happens, I believe it happens all the time. I mean, and it happens like on a 360, right? So
Yeah.
we can be both the victims and the perpetrators of microaggressions, correct?
Absolutely. And every single person, in this chat, in our working environment has committed microaggression. I think what is important to understand is that most of us don't have bad intention. It's just that in the moment where you want to break the silence, for example, when you want to make a fun introduction, and very often the impact you cause on the other side is unconsiderable. So you don't understand the impact, but your intention is not malicious at all. I mean,
Absolutely.
I've heard people. I mean, we hear people saying, I don't see race, I don't see color all the time. And they meant well. There are ones the intentions actually is about to say we are all equals. I don't see the differences. But you are actually denying that, people of color are massively underprivileged in many, many aspects of their life. It's the same with, I mean, there is no uh, why do we need female empowerment? Everyone is so vogue is equal. So why do you need the parking slot, in the
Absolutely.
first row?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So let me ask you a question, but I'm going to ask the audience first, kind of do a poll with the audience. And then I'll ask you a question while they respond. Okay. So, my question to you people out there is this one. Do you think microaggressions are very frequent at work or do you not? So, what do you believe? They're very frequent or they're not? And in answering, you can start thinking whether they're more frequent than with your friends or than with your family, for example, that there's tons of microaggressions, at least in my family. So you compare it and think, okay, so is it that at work there are more microaggressions than we normally see in our own different ambiances, like family and friends? So I'm going to just love your responses. And in the meantime, Jingjin, let me ask you, please, to give us some clear examples of what you believe are microaggressions at work.
So microaggression at work specifically, some example, there are some, the interesting part is that 80% we know what is known microaggression. And other 20%, we are just so used to it and we are not even aware that it's actually microaggression. So for example, an Asian American, and we have quite a few, they are Singaporean, but they are actually born in Australia or they are born in the US. So they speak, they are American to a native English speaker. And the Singaporean local people, obviously, they speak a very different kind of English. We call them Singlish. And these people, I mean, they look Asian, just like myself, and they are complimented of speaking good English. But they are Americans. Of course, they speak good English. Small things like this. We tell here in this part of the world, we tell brown person, we are yellow person. This is how we name ourselves, but for Indian, for example, Malay, Indonesian, this part of the world, they are darker than myself, and we tell them, oh, you are really articulate. Then you assume that, because usually people are construction workers, or you mistake a Malay lady in the office as the clean lady, for example. You ask, the direction, can you give me a tissue? And you asking a Black person, can I touch your hair? Just happened
Right.
recently when we had a teammate and said, can I touch your hair?
Oh,
And these are things that are obvious, but there are things also like, when are you going to have children?
well, but now, Jingjin, as you're saying that about your hair, for example, or about your tone, or about your level of English, now you can take that as a microaggression, or you might take it as a compliment.
Oh, absolutely. That's why it's all about how the other person perceive it. So at the end of the day, we all come from very different background, different good and bad things that happened to us, have impacted us, has shaped who we are today. The same thing you said to let's say, a very confident person, grew up in a very pampered environment with love, with encouragement and with confidence, she or he wouldn't mind at all. Whereas where you will have someone, we have a colleague, recently we just ran a workshop with a person, and the manager made a compliment saying the most qualified person in the room get the job. So this is our company philosophy. And afterwards he told me, I know it's a compliment, but I fight harder than anybody else in this room. She's a Black person. I fight harder, and I have to break barriers. I work 25% more. I have to take care of my family. So many things he wouldn't see. And I am still not sure whether I am just, the quota person that they promoted me. So because then he come from very different family background, whereas maybe someone with the same, appearance, but coming from a very privileged family. Some of our clients are from very privileged Indian family. They don't have this problem at all, but they are people of color as well. So it's
Right.
really, that's why we need to be extremely careful. I understand also how people could be very confused. I mean, well, what can you say nowadays? Almost
Yeah,
nothing.
or how, I guess that my question would be, how do you realize when it is a microaggression and when it is an compliment, admiration? For example, can I touch your hair? It could be something that they're admiring your hair because it's different and it's okay. Well, to me, it would be okay, but how would you distinguish a microaggression between a microaggression and maybe an admiration, I would say?
Yeah. So again, it's about how the other person perceive it. So in the moment, that's why we educate both sides. So in the moment, for example, let's just take the hair example. When you have two person, someone feel, I'm pregnant now, so people want to touch my belly,
Yes,
and
of course.
I don't mind generally, but there are days that I do mind. So it's about it's about educate the one on the perceiving sides. I'm saying, okay, if I don't want that, I will state it. And it's about, because at the end of the day, you can't, like you said, it's I meant it as a compliment, but since I don't understand that you can't, that you have experienced, that you have bad experience in this case, and you feel this discriminized, for example, but I wouldn't know. So it's always better to ask firstly, and then the person who is on the receiving side has to draw a very clear boundary. What happens, why microaggression has become an issue nowadays in the working environment, is that on the receiving side, people never draw boundaries. Because it's what's the big deal? You touch my hair, so what? You touch my belly, so what? Don't make a big scene out of it. What's the problem? You don't want to be that person. But the thing is that this is how we slowly move our boundary to one day it has become a sexual harassment. Therefore, the whole idea of understanding microaggression is to make people aware that whatever you say, especially in the workplace, we need to understand the only goal we have in the workplace is to be productive. At the end of the day, of course, we want to have connection as well. But at the end of the day, everything you say, does it make you more productive? Does it make your relationship with that person better? Does it enhance your work performance? If this does not fulfill any of those criteria, what is exactly the point to say that in the work environment? I mean, in the evening when we have a drink, that's a different story.
Well, yes, but it's so difficult to draw the line. I
It
mean,
is.
because I understand what your point of that, at work, we only have to be productive, but also the more, um, I would not know exactly what word to use, whether it's profound or whether it's real or whether it's genuine or whether it's relaxed relationships that are nurtured at work. I mean, sometimes your best friends come from work. Sometimes even couples get together. I mean, people meet and then they live together happily ever after at work. So at work, we spend so much time. And it is my belief that human beings were relational beings, So there, I believe that cultural differences between, different countries and different cultures have a lot to say. And I do remember a lawyer in Miami that she was working for a Spanish company, and the new CEO, became an Argentinian guy in that company in the US. So he would call his secretary in a way that an Argentinian CEO would be kind of okay to call his secretary that way, like to call her to his office, right? And the lawyer was saying like, no,
Shocked.
please don't say that here. I mean, we're going to get a lawsuit if you keep calling your secretary like that. So I believe that there are cultural differences, but and that yes, we human beings are emotional beings as well, but also we need to build some sort of resilience or flexibility, or how would you put it? How would you navigate both sides, Jingjin? I mean, you're an expert on this.
It is solely for, I mean, just to make things easier, because there are so many narrative and you have to be so careful about things. And we want to build connection we want to be professional, but build connection at the same time. So for
Exactly.
us, for me personally, and then just getting also the experience from the practice, what really work is for the one receiving end to draw a clear boundary. Because as you rightfully said, many times, many of the things that happen, that we consider today as microaggression, if we have a list of what kind of microaggression, we used to say, I think I have PTSD from this meeting. And that is considered as a microaggression as well, because you are making joke of people who really have that problem. So one day we have this workshop and people are saying, what exactly can you say? It's really not about what you can say. You should be aware, you should be conscious about the impact you should potentially cause. But it's all about from the receiving end, how do I draw the boundaries? The same sentence, same things you said to the same person 5 years ago and today will make a big difference. When do you have children? When the girl is 25, she would never consider this as, oh, am I under pressure? Where someone in this region, for example, is 35, she would feel massively attacked. The confident levels of saying, okay, I don't want to have children. And this is in Asian context, is a big taboo, for example, for women not to have children. So the same question asking for the same person, even the different life stage would cause different impacts. So it's really about when do you draw your boundary and how to say things that you don't feel comfortable with.
So I want to ask you, and I would like to ask the audience as well, because I'm thinking about microaggressions 360, right? I
Yeah.
mean, we all are perpetrators somehow, and we all are victims in some other way. But I would like to just do another poll and ask the audience, What do you think, as far as the aggressors, who do you believe that they're more microaggressive at work, men or women? Now, before you answer, Jingjin, let me give you another question for you while the audience answers. So just remember, let me know, men or women, who do you believe are more microaggressive at work? Okay, so that question goes for the audience and for you. When you're in a negotiation, for example, there are many of microaggressions all the time. There are many bad negotiators who believe that a negotiation is about winning and not thinking about a win-win situation, right? But most people would approach a negotiation thinking, okay, so how am I going to win this? What am I going to get out of this? Not how can we make this bigger and better for everybody, in this negotiation. Now, say, for example, that you get your counterpart that you're really interested in doing business with, and that person would say something like, you lived in Germany, right? And you're now in Singapore. So he or she would say, well, Jingjin, yes, but here in Germany, we do things differently. How do you respond to that in a smart way without being aggressive and not without being too sensitive? Because you can't, I mean, you're interested in the business, right?
Yeah. In this specific case, no, it's more about who has the power.
Yeah.
If you are in the negotiation table and if I were the vendor in that case, I want to have the deal. And in Germany, an exactly sentence actually happened to me when I was also
Sure,
in the automotive industry. And I was the only woman, the only Asian, the only one under 35, in the senior director role. And on the other side, when we were negotiating with the manufacturers and the German guy, and he knew that he was actually in a less comfortable position, but he has the power. And he said, in Germany, we do it this way. And in my case specifically, I didn't know better at that time. So I said, in Asian, we do things this way. And this is actually what made me here, what made me successful as we are today. So you somehow have to redirect the wind a bit you take the wind out of the conversation, out of, and I think that the challenging part, I perceive this as in the past as challenging because it's malicious. But today it's much easier. Actually, it's much easier to fight back. When things like this is communicated, things like this, when people don't have bad intentions, it's actually very difficult to draw your own boundaries because they meant well. Whereas in this case, if say in Germany we do things this way, and then let's weigh the pros and cons. And you have to redirect, especially when you don't have the specific power in the negotiation. You have to redirect the wind in a way. That is.
So I'm going to just make a new definition of microaggressions. I'm going to make the microaggressions like unintentional, and then the macroaggressions like something that it's intentionally said, although it might be subtle, but it's intentionally said to diminish you. So do you agree with that? Different categories of things.
We generally say macroaggressions are targeting not you personally. It's about Asian. And this happens actually, for example, people saying, I think Chinese people, how Chinese people are, they are not polite, and you generalize a group, and they brought COVID in the world, things like this, for example. But I'm in the conversation. I am Chinese, and there's another Jingjin, it's not about you. That is actually microaggression. So it's not necessarily the microaggression is towards the person, and macroaggression is more towards to the group. Yeah.
So it is generalizing so much that you cannot. There's no room for you to not feel involved in that aggression somehow.
Yeah.
Right.
And the thing is, it's very often, and that's a difficult part, it is not, it's just a stereotype. We were having a conversation with our Spanish partner, and we have the counterpart who's German. And
Okay.
after negotiation, after we closed the deal, we went for a drink. And then he said, I'm so surprised that then the German guy said you stayed until 6 p.m. and without having your siesta. And the Spanish guy was very insulted. And then he feels like, okay, we almost have to change the deal. Because he said, okay, how dare you, insult my country? And then the German guy said, but it is the truth. Look at your GDP. Look at where how people work. Look at your economy. So it suddenly become a macroaggression in that case, saying it started with a harmless joke, as saying, I actually admire you stay for so long, because we have different experience with other Spanish colleagues, but I actually want to admire your work ethic. But then suddenly, because I said it that way, that person was a very patriotic Spanish person, and he said, okay, where is this coming from? So, but the intention was not bad at all. And then it ended actually in a very uncomfortable conversation at the end. So
Right.
this is after work. And imagine this would happen during the work, and that deal would definitely, not coming to the end.
Well, Jingjin, as you put it, I think that yes, we do have to become aware. Yes, we have to be very sensitive when we speak. We have to become better communicators, something that we do it, we specialize on doing that. But also, we have to become more resilient. I mean, the world right now we're all connected. Look at us,
Yeah.
we're everywhere. I mean, my mix of cultures you can't possibly imagine. I lived in so many countries myself. Right now I'm living in Spain, but I'm not from Spain, but my mom was from Spain. And then she wasn't from Madrid. She was from Barcelona, which is a different culture. So it is a mess.
Yes.
Um, and then so because we're so connected, we're so international, we're so, and also because we started speaking up, and people with differences or different opinions or different sexual orientations or what have you started showing up and saying, hey, listen, I mean, I'm exactly like you. I just think differently, or I just live differently, or I just choose differently from you. So it's fine. I mean, we're all aware of that. Now, with that said, also, each one of us, I believe it's upon us to become more resilient and not so sensitive, so hypersensitive to everything. Don't you think?
I agree, but I think, with the work, we have run so many workshops now with corporates, and especially our audience are more in Australia and in APAC, in this region. So what occurred to me is that what you mentioned, that, we need to become more resilient. We have to be, the marginalized group started to speak up. And we should not be hypersensitive, and not assume. We should always assume positive. We should always assume positive intention. Having said that, though, the marginalized group has suffered through, serious microaggression in the past 100, if not thousands of years. And finally, you have the opportunity to raise your voice, because now you will be heard through globalization, through multinational team, through the Vogue society. You need to let them be heard as well. It's like it's a example that I have every time. It's will become a very heated conversation. In fact, is that we run a workshop for women specifically. How to build confidence in competence, how to deal with microaggression, how to manage up things that women are generally not good at. And the male, and I get this a lot from the diversity inclusion officers saying, oh, can you change the narrative to, instead of navigating through modern women's challenge, to navigating through modern world's challenge, because equality means we need to include everybody. And this is the fallacy, is that there are certain group, let's just say it out loud, let's say white male, they have been privileged, for the past thousands of years. And now the marginalized group, have the voice. You have to let them be heard as well. You can't just say, okay, we understand your issue. Let's not be super hypersensitive, because otherwise things will never change then. You actually need to let the marginalized group to raise their voice and to be heard.
Well, that for sure. I mean, for sure you have to let them, for sure we have to start respecting the freedom of speech everywhere and for everybody. 100% agree. In fact, I don't think I ever doubted that in my life, and I do remember I was interviewed at CNN for Women's International Day some years ago, when I was living in the US. And I said, well, I believe that the human brain has judgment, and the judgment is biased by how we grow up. So, for example, in my family, we're 10 of 10, and we're 7 women, 7 sisters, 3 brothers. So I guess that, we found the way, and there was a lot of chauvinism. You can't possibly imagine. And we all succeeded. So I'm wondering, we're all biased somehow, and we have to start realizing, emotional intelligence is about, number one thing, self-awareness. So before we feel that we're victims, I would challenge everybody to think that we're perpetrators, and that it is up on us to realize that we also judge, that we also diminish people sometimes, and that we do it intentionally and unintentionally all the time. So the more that we realize it in ourselves, we can correct ourselves. It is harder to correct the rest of the world. So that's why I was bringing the thing or the issue with you of being resilient. Because
in that aspect, I absolutely agree. At the end of the day, you define again your boundaries, and then telling it's you can't stop other people from saying things intentionally or unintentionally. You can only build your own resilience, but building resilience means also not to suck it up. I just say it very bluntly. It meaning also, to make you, especially when you feel that some of the comments, and that happens still a lot, are pushing a little bit the boundaries, and then you draw your boundary now instead of several times later, because there is no perfect point. The whole microaggression, sexism, racism topics here is about to build awareness about what should you say, what could you potentially cause, and when do you draw boundaries. Absolutely. And the boundary is blur, and we need to make it aware. And this is especially in this part of the world, why it's so essential, because Asian, we have learned the value not to speak up in general, men and women more, but even men, they grow up and say, okay, you be strong, be the
absolutely, yes. I've been in China.
Family.
Yeah.
And don't speak up, don't be weak. And this is detrimental, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have a question from the audience, from Henry, and he says, hi, how can we professionally stop an ongoing microaggression at work? Do you have any takes on that?
Yeah, a lot. So it's actually simple steps. So if you are the target, that's the part where we say you have to draw the boundaries, meaning that you have to explain how that microaggression make you feel. And then what is important is that you criticize the microaggression is in things like, you said something against what I don't like about what you just said. What impact me is that, not the person. What we very often we do falsely is like, that person always discriminates so and so. It's about that fact, never about that person. And you can also start just with a short conversation because we are in a busy, running mode in work, and revisit that later. So if you're on target, really, draw your boundaries. If you're a bystander, this happens a lot as well. And you really have to step up and be an ally to that person. But again, not criticize that person, the person who committed the microaggression, um, and don't say things on behalf of the target. Saying, for example, a situation and a woman, and she said, "Can you make the meeting minutes?" Um, everyone else is in the room is man, and then we asked the only female manager to make the meeting minutes because the secretary was not available. Then stand up and saying, it's anyone else can do it as well. Volunteer to do that as well. So it's about be an ally, and then but don't discriminate, don't say things on behalf of the target. And very often when you self actually committed a microaggression, and the best thing is, I mean, it sounds so easy, but it's very difficult to practice. It's actually just try not to be defensive, because most of the time your intention is not bad. I had the same case, and someone just said to me, "Oh no, that's not right what you're saying." And I was like, "Oh no, I didn't mean." The immediate reaction I have is to defend myself. But it doesn't matter what my intention was, because I caused harm in that person. So you apologize and try to understand from their perspective.
Right. Yeah. Well, and then also there's a line between, especially in large corporations, if you are being if you're feeling that those constant microaggressions or ongoing microaggressions are being targeted to you and by one person, for example, or one group of persons. And I remember I had this experience when I was in corporate America of being totally taken out of a team, and yeah, being totally left out. They took out all the clients. The company was really harassing me. And then, I mean, I had to be resilient with that. It is some years ago. But if it was happening to me today, what I would be doing is reporting that, because there is the ESG, where the G is governance. And of course, you have compliance. And in corporations, and especially, well, in all corporations, they need to be very careful with not stepping on that side, of being not compliant to the policies, especially the equality policies in a company. So, Henry, I don't know if that answers your question, but I hope you can manage that successfully. So bring it up to if you're feeling harassed, especially. I mean, if from micro we came to the macroaggressions in my own definition, just bring it up, speak up, and just remember that you also have leverage. Everybody has leverage. And when someone is doing a micro or macroaggression to you, especially, it is because they feel that you have some leverage. If not, you would not be the target. So fight back. I mean, speak up. Don't you think, Jingjin?
Absolutely. I think that the challenge in the practice, what's the challenge there, is that especially for men and women in power, senior managers, with the feedback we get, just speak up is not helping. It's because the things is so insevere. He said some things that this dress suits you really well. It's not what he said, it's the way how he said it. So how can I, how is it a compliment? But in that specific case, for example, I'm talking, it was a harassment actually, because the way he said it. So do I run, me as a senior director of the company, do I run to HR saying he has done that? I can't. So this will, actually make me powerless, because then I will become the one, oh my God, because HR specifically can't do anything with that. So what we recommend is actually to document. Is that in that specific case, okay, you say that just to document on that day, ideally you even have someone, on your side. And then when it becomes a pattern, is that you have a plan. It's not like, okay, I don't draw boundary. You can mention, okay, I don't feel comfortable. Thank you for your compliment, but I don't actually feel comfortable about receiving this kind of compliments, and really kind of you, but let it go a bit in that narrative. If it happens again, because people like to push boundaries, and you just noted them down. And then once you have a 3 to 5 incidences, this will happen if the intention is malicious, then you can take that book, actually go into HR, which give you much more leverage. And this is valid for, I mean, every kind of harassment, microaggression, and so on.
Yeah, and also HR and compliance. Because sometimes compliance is really who should be taking care of these issues when they become something constant, something very targeted. Jingjin, it has been such a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for bringing up this so important subject and topic to the table. Thank you for your work, especially in Asia, as you founded your company there, and we hope you spread it throughout the world because everybody needs it. So good luck with that, and we're here to help you out in any way.
Thank you so much for having me on this platform. I'm really honored, and I hope that people who have listened to get some takeaways. And yeah, all the best for the platform. I think it's really important to to spread different topics and essential unspoken topic like this as well.
Absolutely. And, to all of you that you're watching us here at Do It, we do specialize on helping you communicate better. And I believe that learning how to communicate, it is something that we were never taught when we were kids, nor when we were at the university many times. So do learn, because if not, you're going to be hindering your own career. And we do need to be better communicators, all of us. Thank you so much for being here.
Especially, I'll just add on one thing,
Sure.
especially the uncomfortable conversations. Everything what we
Especially.
just talked is uncomfortable conversations.
Yeah.
We learned, especially this part of world, we learned how to do algebra, but we can solve, complex math problem, but we never learned how to have uncomfortable conversations, and to tell, to draw boundaries and tell the truth. Therefore, to be the better communicator. I mean, it sounds so easy, but it's really a skill set that you
Well,
have
you
to
know
learn.
what? I think that it is the uncomfortable and sometimes also the comfortable conversations. People, um, especially women, we have a program for women who have something to say. That's how we call it, and
Mm,
it's a public speaking program. And what we found out is that women do not feel comfortable speaking in public, being visible, and speaking about their achievements, you know.
mm.
So sometimes it is not only, it is for sure the difficult conversations, but also even the empowering conversations, the inspirational conversations, the leadership conversations. So
Yeah.
everybody needs to get trained, with you, with me, with everybody. Okay. Hey, Jingjin, thank
Thank
you
you
so
so
much
much.
again. Okay. Goodbye to
Thank
our
you.
audience. See you
Goodbye,
next time.
everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye. Bye.